I want to repeat something I said for the Boulder incubator, because it's something that is really it's a paradoxical situation, it's ironic, and it's a pain in the butt. And that is what it is like to be truly on the cutting edge of evolution. This is, if ever there was a good news, bad news scenario, this is it. The good news, of course, is that you are ushered, and I'm assuming everybody in this room has some significant degree of integral awareness. You're ushered into a really profound opening and deepening and widening of awareness. As a matter of fact, this particular stage of development hasn't occurred in humankind's history really ever. This is a truly historic moment. And of the 5 major transformations of human history, this is now the 6th. So something very, very, very profound is going on. And you are caught up in it for reasons that I don't think you or I or anybody really understands. I mean, evolution's unfolding. Why did you get tapped on the shoulder to be part of this? And according to that book, there's no reasons. But something special is unfolding in you. And how to come to terms with that specialness can be a truly delicate and difficult situation. So on the one hand, you don't want to just play it too, humble, because this is happening to you. This is a really profound, extraordinary thing. It makes you one of less than 5% of the world's population that is dramatically evolved and developed. And that's extraordinary. And so, as with the Tibetan practice, when you visualize, there are 2 things that you want to do when you visualize a deity form in your awareness. One is the clarity of the form that you hold. And the second is divine pride. You are to really identify with this deity and find that to be a part of your own being. And there's a divine pride in that. You should feel proud about that. And so there should be a kind of divine pride in the fact that you were tapped on the shoulder to be part of this extraordinary unfolding. 6 major unfoldings in the history of humanity. And you are one of them. So, on the positive side, you have an expansive sense of awareness. You can take more perspectives. You have a greater capacity for love and care and concern and consciousness. And this gives you an enormous sense in your daily life of freedom and of fullness. And you can't go back. I mean, it's just, you're there and you've got this bigger picture and you are stuck with it. You're like, yes, I see it. I've never seen anybody get the 4 quadrants and then wake up one day and go, I don't believe in them. That toothpaste won't go back in the tube. It's truly an indelible part of what your awareness is. And so that's extraordinary. You really are expanding. You truly, literally are at the leading edge of evolution unfolding. And evolution becoming aware of itself. And evolution, of course, is spirit in action. You are truly riding the edge of a surfboard made of spirit. And whether you particularly think of yourself as spiritual or think of yourself as secular, whatever the ground of being, however you wish to think about it, you are riding that into the future. And this is an indelible part of what you are. So that's the good news. The bad news is there are so very, very, very few of you. There are so very few people at integral stages of development, at being levels of motivation. And so this makes it extremely difficult for you to get along in the everyday world. Most of your friends don't get it. And so you're kind of, well, see, there's like these 4 quadrants, and they're like, oh, time for lunch. Sorry, or I have to go feed my goldfish, and because sorry, that. Or worse, they see you coming at them with 3 or 4, like Wilber books. Run! Here he comes for those damn books. And like, Jesus Christ. And sitting down and actually being able to find a conversation about something truly integral, whether it's Gebser, Torber, Laszlo, doesn't matter. But finding a way that you can have a conversation about that becomes truly, truly, truly difficult. And so, without bragging, braggadocio, no room for that. Divine pride, yes. But divine pride also has a humbleness about it and a softness about it. And it doesn't have an edge or a push or a pride in the negative egoic sense. But being able to actually hold that and move forward into the world can be very, very difficult because essentially you're on your own. And you really are closeted. You're closet integralists. Now, in Hawaii, if you're gay, you can get married. But I don't think you can if you're integral. I just don't think that's on the books. That's like, no, sorry, you're what? Oh, get the fuck out of here. That is horrid. I'm not sure what that is, but it's bad. And we are in the midst of all this wonderful plenty, this expanded consciousness, expanded care, expanded concern, expanded awareness, expanded love. There is, good luck, you're on your own. And this can become extremely problematic when we start looking at things like the marketplace and financial situation. We don't yet have an integral group of people in this country or the Western world that has self-identified and that knows what integral is, and so it's out looking for integral products. We have traditional values. People know what those are. I might not be able to give you an actual list of it, but if you say traditional values and do that, they'll say, yeah, that's I believe in traditional values. Family values and religious beliefs and belief in the Bible, etc. Yeah, I'm a traditional believer. And then there are modern believers, people that believe in excellence and achievement and accomplishment, and also believe in a fairness, treating all people the same regardless of race, color, sex, or creed. Whereas traditional values, you have to buy their values or you're going to burn in hell. I don't want you to burn in hell, you understand. God, it's God. And so you're going to fry. And but they know what their values are, and there's no confusion about that. And upwards, depending on really how you count this, but upwards of 40% in this country have traditional values. This is a lot of people. And to make it worse, every time somebody exits traditional to a higher stage, somebody enters it. Because everybody's born at square one. And it's like, yeah, we got rid of that traditional believer. Whoops, 2 more new ones show up. It's like, oh, man. So there's that constant stream of, okay, get rid of 1, in come 2. Get rid of 1, here come 2 more. That's a big block, and they self-identify. They know who they are. And so they know what to look for in terms of, if they want a doctor who has traditional beliefs, they know what that means. They want to go to a school that has traditional values that are emphasized. And as a matter of fact, might teach intelligent design alongside of Darwinian evolution. And they want that. So they know to look for it. They know exactly what their values are. And the same with the modern values. They know exactly what their values are. And they want equal opportunity for everybody, regardless of race, color, sex, or creed. They want people to be promoted based on their merit, based on their achievement, based on their accomplishment, based on how well they do. That's what lets you get promoted. Not whether you believe in Jesus as your personal Savior, but can you do quality work? These people are self-identified. They know what they mean when they talk about their values, when they talk about a meritocracy, when they talk about letting people work their way up. And we have upwards of maybe 50% of the population has these kinds of modern values. Into postmodern. People that this came up in the early 60s, and it was a rather explosive growth of level of development. I would say, right offhand, probably the most explosive emergence of a value structure in history. Most of the other levels that emerged took a little bit of time to get out there and get spread around and get settled in. But with the boomers and the extraordinary pressure that they brought with them and the drive and the ambition, they brought in the green, pluralistic, postmodern, cultural, creative wave with a vengeance. And, of course, it's like the others, it's part of first tier or deficiency needs. And so it thinks that its values are the only real values in existence. And so it thinks that, all of science and all of religion, they're all just socially constructed knowledge bases. And neither one of them are more right or less right than the other. It's just different ways of interpreting this blooming, buzzing confusion of experience. One exception is their view, which isn't an interpretation, but it's the truth. And so so much for the performative contradiction. But all three of these value structures are recognized and are known. And you go to the New York Times editorial pages and you look at the culture wars, and you look at the new atheists, and you look at the traditionalists, you look at the postmodern, and they're all there. The astonishing thing about it is how true to the structure their pronouncements are. They're just the postmodernists that are representing that view. It's like they're reading from the textbook of this is what the pluralistic stage is like. Because it's just word for word for word for word for word, same. Modern structure, same thing. Word for word for word for word for word. It comes out of this formal operational stage of being. And same true for amber or traditional. Whether we're looking at it, whether it's Southern Baptists blowing up abortion clinics, or whether it's Sikhs having border fights with India, whether it's Buddhist groups putting sarin gas in the Tokyo subway system, they all have the same essential, fundamental structure. What we don't have happen yet is individuals at integral levels identifying their worldview and saying, okay, this is what I believe, this is what I see, I want it to be inclusive, I realize there's importance for all of the earlier stages of development, I want a world that finds room for all of those. Stages of development become stations in life, and we need to figure out how to have a governmental system where these stations in life can all have something to contribute and something to say, but we find some way to rule from the highest. So we would want to rule from turquoise, but find room for all of the preceding 7 or so major value structures. That's what we're looking for in the coming decades, is how to include everybody but rule from the greatest depth. And we've never been called on to do that in history. Because the leading edge was the edge that dominated. It's the one that ran most forms of government, ran most forms of education, and so on. And so we're coming up now, we are just in this unbelievably difficult, delicate, excruciating period where we have maybe 4 or 5% of the population is at the next high stage of development, teal or turquoise. But they don't know it, they're not organized, they don't have political parties, they don't have a coherent existence in school boards. And so what we find is usually in every single department, in every university in this culture, 2, maybe 3 people that know integral. The rest of the department doesn't. And so they're stuck flying at the same altitude that the rest of the department is, which is green. So when in Rome, fuck a Roman. It's you're stuck with it. And we are looking some developmentalists feel that within about 10 years, we'll have about 10% of the population at integral. Now that will be extraordinary, because just a kind of an anecdotal, loose look at what happens when the leading edge of evolution reaches 10% is there's a tipping point and a massive change goes through culture. So even though only 10% of the population is at, let's say, orange, going back to the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, about 10% of the population had moved into orange. Even though only 10% was at orange, it had a profound impact on the entire culture. And it's as if we started adopting orange values, even though people were not yet at orange themselves. So, in a 100-year period, we got rid of slavery. Never, ever, ever happened before. And not something amber wants to do. It's not something red wants to do. It's not something magenta wants to do. They all had slavery. But it's something orange wants to do. And as soon as 10% of the population hit orange, we got rid of slavery. We had the rise of feminism. We had the rise of representative democracies. The Constitution of the United States is essentially an orange document. Even though only 10% of the people in the United States were orange. 90% were amber or red or magenta. And yet we passed this extraordinary document. Same thing happened at green. 1959, 2% of the population was green. 1969, well over 10% was green, and by 1979, over 20% was green. 1979, Jacques Derrida was the most widely quoted author in academia. And the values of green started to permeate the entire culture. So we had serious feminism, we had the environmentalism movement, we had social justice movements, we had conscious business, even though only 10% of the population is actually at those values start to seep through the entire culture. Now we're at a point where, with approximately 5% of the population at integral, we're waiting for that next 5%, so we have about 10% of the population at integral. And when that happens, if history is any sort of guide, we're going to see a tipping point. And we're going to see integral values permeate this culture. And even though people will still be at amber and at orange and at green, it's going to shift the way they think. So they'll be thinking integral values from a green perspective, but it'll still be closer to integral. They'll really be thinking about that. Orange will be thinking about integral values. Amber even will be thinking about integral values. And it'll start to permeate this entire culture. And so what we want, of course, is to try to stay ahead of that and to, as I put it, there's this tsunami of integral coming. And we can see it. Now, the previous major transformations that occurred, green, for example, if you look at what sociologists were writing right before green started to emerge, not one of them got it right. Not one of them guessed the staggering revolution that the 60s would bring, or the values that it would bring. they were writing things like The Lonely Crowd, and and all of a sudden, we just woke up one morning, Paris, May 1968, and you've got an entire student revolution on your hands. The kids ran through Paris writing "Down with Structuralism," that being the equivalent of down with the system in America. And things were never the same. Things categorically were never the same. That green value structure slammed through all of culture. So now we're waiting to see what happens with this next emergence. And by the way, this next stage emergence into teal or yellow V-mean or early vision logic or autonomous, it's not just a stage growth, it's a tier growth. And that's staggering. We've never had, at least not in terms of first tier and second tier, all of our previous transformations in humanity have been first tier. Now, tiers, incidentally, are not something that are, in a sense, real in the human psyche. What tiers are is, as developmental psychologists watch stages unfold and emerge and grow and unfold and emerge and grow, every now and then they find a really major shift that's so different from the previous stage, they'll say, okay, this is a new tier. That new tier doesn't mean that some new kind of thing came into existence. It's still just another stage. But the stage is so dramatically different and has so many more characteristics, so many more emergent qualities, that a lot of psychologists say, okay, that's a tier. Now we see three tiers in what spiral dynamics calls first tier. Those three tiers are pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Those are three very big changes. And Claire Graves was aware of those: egocentric, ethnocentric, world-centric. But then as he moved from green, what he called relativistic, into what he called systemic, he said there was an unprecedented leap of value. It simply staggered him, the difference. And so he said, okay, we've got a second tier here. And that was the first time that he saw something so wildly different that he named it a tier. But we could, like say, just as well say that's fourth tier, if you add pre-conventional, conventional, post-conventional, and then integral. But one thing's for sure, in terms of first tier and second tier, in the Maslow system, in the Claire Graves system, we've never, ever, ever, ever had a leap in development that huge. And that's coming our way. And developmental psychologists know it's coming our way. Unlike with orange and unlike with green, they are not going to get caught off guard. This tsunami is coming in, and they are all sitting out on the California beaches with their instruments waiting to measure this puppy. They know it's coming. And of course, we're all sitting back there with the surfboard concession, trying to figure out ways to sell this as it comes crashing in. But that's what's going to be really, quite extraordinary in the coming years. In the meantime, it's not easy. It's not easy to be at the leading edge of evolution as it unfolds. And it's not easy, among other things, because in a sense you're almost on your own. So we find ways that we can come together like this. We find ways that we can make salons. We find groups where we can get together and talk. We look for the occasional seminar that's integral in its intent. But they're not flooding the market. They're not everywhere. And so it can make it very, very, very hard for you to be able to find a group, an organization, a business where you can fit in with other people that as soon as you start talking integral, they don't give you that deer light caught in headlight stare. And so ways that you can actually feel at home and feel comfortable and feel that you can talk about these things and not get ridiculed for them. Green looks at teal, looks at yellow beaming. And because green is radically egalitarian, and teal reintroduces nested hierarchies and individuality. Green looks at individuality of teal or of yellow beaming, and it sees red. And it condemns it. It says, oh, that's just narcissistic, egocentric, power-driven crap. And so green is ever on alert for ways that it can spot teal and pull it down. And so it's like in a book that Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, wrote, the title of the book was 53 More of God's Biggest Mistakes. Now, 54th is second tier emerges out of green swamp. Whose bloody idea was that? That the only way you can get to second tier is by passing through this green egalitarian mush. And you have to drag yourself out of that, drag yourself into second tier, and hope to, have a clean getaway. But that's just that's right up there with the duck-billed platypus. That is crazy. But that's where we are. That's exactly where we are. Pushing through that, in some cases, really enormous resistance. And those of you who are teaching at universities or working in some place like that, and you try to explain integral frameworks and integral values, you're probably not surprised to run into an enormous amount of resistance from green colleagues. They just, no, that's just nothing, but we got over that. We're out of that egocentric, narcissistic, kind of thing. We're into pulling together as a group and doing work together as a group. So it's hard. It makes it really, really, really hard. So, of course, one of the things that we're continuing to look at and look to do is find ways to make second tier economically viable. And it's going to be a tough stretch until we hit about 10% of the population Because then there's going to be that tipping point. There's going to be these values sort of spread throughout culture. And you'll have a much easier chance of finding jobs that are integral and finding university teaching posts that are integral. We're already starting to see more and more and more of this. But it's a very, very difficult situation. And what's happened with all of the past transformations in human history, the first individuals to go out and to attempt to create techno-economic modes of development are up against it. It's not easy. But at the same time, it's something that you can continue to think about and you can be very proud about. That you are part of evolution's unfolding. You're a part of spirit in action. And in a very profound way, in a truly extraordinary fashion. This is something that you've been called on to do. And again, you might not understand it. I might not understand it. It's in some ways a lot of this is a mystery, but it's happening, and it's happening in a very, very real fashion. So, you're getting your degrees is a terrific idea because it lets you become more familiar with the theory. And so you can start to see ways in which it can be applied out there in the real world. And as we get closer and closer to 10% of the population, and all of a sudden there's just more and more interest in it, more and more interest in it, more and more interest in it, your knowledge and familiarity with the overall framework, or any integral framework, will allow you to economically find a viable place in this economy. And it will be a major economy shift. The types of economy and the openings and what becomes available is going to be stunning. Absolutely stunning. No less stunning than when the Industrial Revolution came and replaced the feudal revolution. Or when the knowledge economy and the internet came and replaced the Industrial Revolution. We're now ready for the next type of economy that will replace, at the least, transcend and include the information economy. And virtually everybody in this room will live to see something like that happen. And you are blessed or cursed to be a generation that's going to see that. And so, may all of us hold on until that time. Extraordinary period. Extraordinary period. And we'll go down in the history books. And you will be able to tell your grandchildren. Daddy and Mommy had a hand in it.